Hi there everybody, Steve, the amateur historian, and I'm gonna have a story today that's gonna ruffle some feathers, but considering the type of people whose feathers would be ruffled by what I'm gonna talk about here and the perspectives I may have, I really don't care if I'm pissing you off. Anyway, it is June 24th, 2021. You know what that means? A new day, a new story. But before we get to that, remember as always to like, share, subscribe, all these little ways you help my channel grow. Become a Patreon supporter now. I'm trying to post there at least twice a week. A bunch of extra content in various different forms that you can have access to only if you become a Patreon supporter. Even if it's just $1, that's more than enough. I appreciate you and love you. The link to my Patreon is in the description of this video, as well as the links to my Instagram, Facebook, Reddit subreddit, and my TikTok. So that said, let's start talking about what I think is a very hilarious story that I stumbled upon in an old paper, as I do. So for this story, we're going back to 1922, but before we head back that far, I mean, at least it shouldn't be a wonder to anyone, with the exception of a few relatively rich people in our society, that predominantly November 2016 up until November 2020, it's not a great time. Not a great time in our country, not a great time to feel alive and confident about the future and not worry about whether this whole damn thing was just gonna fall to pieces. We had a particular scumbag for president. Maybe you've heard of him. I won't even waste my time referencing the celebrity's name, because that's really all he is, considering he was worthless as commander-in-chief. And one of the most disgusting things in a, endless list, Trump brought us to, damn it, I just said his name. Trump made the economy better. That's all I hear anybody say who supports Donald Trump. And that all depends on your perspective on what qualifies as an economy getting better. Is you creating more and more crappy jobs that don't support you? That's creating jobs, but it's not creating prosperity. So anyway, that's a discussion for another day. But one of the most disgusting elements of our most recent former president, don't worry, he's coming back. I know the election happened like 7-8 months ago, but he's coming back. He's gonna take back the White House. I still know he's gonna do it. The thing is, this guy had opportunities to dispel and dismiss and generally roast. Since he's so great at roasting people, he had an opportunity to really roast and bring down the white supremacists in this country. Alas, Trump is a businessman, and he knows that, if they're a big chunk of your supporters in whatever you're doing, you don't want to piss them off. And of course, white supremacists supported, again, our most recent former president, hand over fist. It's not any great mystery. So, when he had the opportunity to do it, Trump wouldn't call out white supremacists for what they were, and that is absolutely filthy, trash, disgusting. I don't care who the guy is, everybody knows I love Bernie Sanders, but if like a major, white supremacist, a tragedy happened, like a white supremacist killed somebody because of their race, their color, their creed, or something like that, and Bernie Sanders didn't come out and dismiss it, I'd be like, what the F, Bernie? I'd be pissed at him. Of course, he would never do that because he's actually human. So, it's not just Trump. It's, the Republican Party is just a disease. It's such a, and I'm a former Republican. I used to be one of those guys that was bouncing around town talking about how we were justified in being in Iraq and how George Bush was misunderstood. I voted down at least 2 different measures to legalize gay marriage in Oregon. I was one of those people. And I think one of the things that kind of kept me in that mindset was I was book smart. I just wasn't, the rest of me just hadn't obviously developed properly. My sense of empathy obviously still had a long way to go. But I think, I was very, lost and confused and super introverted, and people were always telling me how smart I was. And to a degree, that was like the only thing I really liked about myself growing up, was that I was smart. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was boring. I thought girls didn't like me. Your basic incel behavior. And that was the one thing I had to hold on, was everyone thought I was smart. So, if that's what you have to hold on, everyone tells you you're smart. Well, if I'm leaning Republican and I'm smart, then how can my perspectives be wrong? That was really it. I didn't do any in-depth research. I was, 23, 24 years old before I really started doing like some deep internal self-analysis and started asking myself, do you really believe these things you say you believe? Because I started having cracks in the dam, so to speak. And I remember the first thing that broke was, I was one of these guys that was like, hey, if you want to be gay, that's fine, but I'm not letting you get married and you don't get all these special rights that were really, basic human rights. And, I watched some of my best friends come out as homosexual. And, that had, it's one of the sad things. Some people actually need to actually witness someone close to them experience something before they wake up. And I remember I started feeling that break, like, why have I had this animosity towards gay people? Where did it come from? Why do I think it's wrong? And I started addressing that question because I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why I felt that way, because I didn't. Deep down internally, I didn't. So that was kind of the beginning of my wake-up call, and that's when I kind of started breaking, that was the first domino that fell. And now, who I am today is absolutely nothing like who I was when I was 18, 21. So, I think back, like, I used to support this political party, and granted, they're somehow substantially worse. Well, I don't know substantially, but they're worse now than they were, start of the new millennium. And I just was I was just lost at that time. And now I look at this political party, and like, it's not just Trump, the party as a whole won't just do what they need to do and acknowledge, hey, white supremacy is really, really wrong. That's a G-rated version of putting it. And they won't, because they know it's not just about Trump. It's about, the party. They know that white supremacists lean more towards, how could you be a liberal Democrat and also be a white supremacist? The belief structures just don't coincide at all. So, that's one of the many tragedies of our present Republican Party, is that they just won't call them out. So we go back to 1922, and of course, political parties change all the time, and they have, and they've changed drastically. We used to have more political parties. We had, the Whig Party, and wasn't there like a Federalist Party? I'm not sure, but Democrats and Republicans 100 years ago didn't have the same platforms that they have now. Not that, Democrats or Republicans are really that great nowadays at actually following their platform. I'm looking at you, Joe Biden, and I'll excuse student loan debt. Never mind. Let's talk about universal health care. You know what? Nah. Don't get me wrong, I take Joe Biden over Donald Trump in a second, but I'm not going to act like we had Satan before and now we have Jesus. It's still politicians. Just one party's politicians are a lot worse. You know, the lesser of two evils is really kind of what the Democratic Party has become. How do we know that? Well, let's see. Maybe because most of us are miserable. Most of us are flat broke. There's easy solutions to a lot of these problems that never get implemented, even though you hear politicians on both sides ramble on over and over again about how we need to do this, we need to do that. And then when all is said and done, either nothing happens or the most minor of fixes occurs. Band-aids get put on problems. And then we wonder why, when big events happen, the people, the general public, come together. But when it comes to politicians who are supposed to be leading us and guiding us, they're always magically missing in action, with the exception of very few. So as I was saying, you know, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they were different back in the early 1920s as opposed to the early 2020s. Vastly different in certain respects. So considering the present state of the Republican Party and their inability to call out and disassociate from racists, bigots, white supremacists, so on, is what made this particular story so entertaining. So this Oregon, you know, Republican committee, it seemed like it was just kind of like a yearly group that got together and they talked shop and talked about how to make things better, how to proceed into the future. It's 1922. How are we going to make 1923 better than 1922? And all that rhetoric. And they met at the Imperial Hotel in downtown Portland, which is one of my most favorite structures in the city. It kind of is similar to the really famous, what is it called? Oh my God, it's like one of the most famous buildings in Portland. The Deacon building. How could I forget? I'm so ashamed. But anyway, they do have kind of a comparable architectural structure. I just love the Imperial. Anyway, love story aside, so the Republican committee gets together and, you know, some of them get up on their soapbox and start talking about stuff. And what's really interesting is most of them, when they got up on this, you know, up front and center and decided to start talking, most of them started railing, really railing on how horrible the Ku Klux Klan was. And you know, it's the early 1920s. The Ku Klux Klan had actually been fairly successful infiltrating the state of Portland in our past. And I know Vernonia, it's a small town kind of up into the Oregon Peninsula, a little ways from Portland. They got totally infiltrated once by, or I guess for a while, by the Ku Klux Klan. And it's interesting because one of the first schools that was integrated in Oregon was in Vernonia. So people really fighting the good fight against a lot of potential dangers. But I just thought it was so great. 100 years ago, the Republicans would come out and say, Ku Klux Klan, aka white supremacists, go f yourself. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to bleep and blur that out. But I don't feel bad about it. And it really seemed their greatest concern was the fear of infiltration into their party by members of the Klan, because, you know, the Klan knew what some people felt about them, and the Klan has always been about being, you know, kind of secretive, and if they wanted to infiltrate something, they were going to try to infiltrate it. So it was kind of like, my fellow Republicans, keep your eyes out, because these are some sneaky bastards. And yeah, they just came up one by one. This representative from Harney County named, I think it was A.W. Gowan. Gowan or Gowan? G-O-W-A-N. I'm thinking it's Gowan. He went up there, and he must have been kind of getting a little older, because he literally said, I'd give every last gray hair on my head to see the KKK, you know, wiped out, or, you know, removed from existence. And this is a guy from Harney County, deep southeast Portland, deep southeast Oregon. You don't get much more rural and potentially redneck than Harney County in terms of Oregon. And I hate to say that because my great-grandfather was the sheriff of Harney County. And by what I've heard, he was a pretty decent fellow. I don't really know a lot about him, though, just that he was that county's sheriff. And when there was, I I wish I could find it. There's like a really, at least in terms of our family, there's a really iconic picture of him. He's in the middle of Burns, little town of Burns, where my grandma grew up. And he's sitting on his horse in the middle of, like, you know, whatever the main street of the city would be. He's sitting on his horse and he's leaning over the edge to shake hands with this man in a suit. And that man was Mark Hatfield, who was the governor of the state at the time. And it's just my great-grandfather leaning over and shaking his hand in the middle of, like, Main Street. And this, so, you know, I have Harney County ties. But anyway, that was kind of what was happening. They were coming up one by one and saying, we got to get rid of this organization. They're gonna try to infiltrate us. But the speaker that probably people waited with most anticipation for was a guy named Walter Eddy, who had just become part of like a Republican committee in Multnomah County, where Portland is. So, you know, in the heart of the county where the largest city is. And this guy apparently was supported by the KKK. You don't get KKK support unless you're doing or agreeing or at least saying you're going to do a lot of pretty disgusting, malicious stuff. So when this guy went up to talk, everybody was kind of like, oh, what's this some bitch gonna say? And he got up there and, you know, he pretty much said what a lot of them were saying, which of course is standard politics, which is, you know, whatever happens, we need to stick together from the bottom to the top. We are Republicans, and everybody at every level of our party, we need to stick together and support each other no matter what. Because after all, nothing can go wrong when you have that kind of logic at work for you. That whole, like, no matter what happens, we stick together. That's how, you know, I mean, I hate to go off on other tangents, but, you know, police officers that have wrongfully killed people, and then the whole police department sticks behind them no matter what they did, no matter how obvious it is what they did, and what they did was wrong. That's one of the things you can get when you adopt this whole stick together no matter what. And I understand in the realm of like police work, if it's like you and a partner, you have to be able to trust each other because you can find yourself facing a succession of life and death situations. But the fact of the matter is, if someone who's with you does something horrible, a horrible crime, a felony, that person needs to face justice. I do not care what their profession is. I don't care what your relationship is. You know, my best friend, Scott, I hate to throw you under the bus. No, we've been best friends for over 20 years now. You know, I love the guy, he loves me. We've lived, you know, hundreds of miles apart. We still text each other all the time. We never fall out of contact. But if I found out one day that he was like, you know, involved in sex trafficking or something, and there was like evidence that showed like this isn't like an accusation, this is real, I'd have to say, sorry buddy, bye. You know, there's a real danger in blind loyalty, but it also can work sometimes to other individuals' benefit, and that's why a lot of people preach this blind loyalty. No matter what happens, we stick together. So, you know, when disgusting Republicans today do disgusting things, what do most Republicans do, with very few exceptions? They stick by them, and they deflect. Oh, well, it's really not that bad of a thing. It's just the Democrats blowing it out of proportion. Well, they don't have all the information. I don't have all the information, so I can't pass judgment yet. And it's just, which obviously if you don't have all the information, don't pass judgment, but, you know, it's like that's something that's always stuck out in politics. Is if you're a member of the party, you stick together no matter what. And that is a disease-ridden way to go about things, because then people who really need to go don't go because everyone's still backing them. But when this Eddy fellow went up and kind of that was his spiel, you know, I don't know what's gonna happen, but we need to stick together, bottom to the top. And he got this big ovation because they were like, hey, he didn't come out and argue with us about the KKK. And it's like, well, it's not like all of a sudden the guy's broken free of their influence. It's probably more that this guy, you know, knew if he talked pro about the KKK, they were going to attack him. So, he just, hell yeah, brother. Oh, God. Anyway, this guy probably knew, you know, he's gonna get attacked if he talks positive about the KKK. So he just gets up there, schmoozes him with this little speech that pretty much just reiterated what everyone else was already saying. He didn't really add anything new to the conversation. And then, you know, everyone applauds him, but when everything ends and he walks off again, is he still, you know, working with the KKK? Probably. And I'm so glad that that KKK influence that used to kind of permeate certain parts of Oregon, that really got beaten down. Not that there's, you know, not issues like that. See the way I juked? I don't think it was that cool looking. Anyway. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm just glad that, you know, obviously there's still, you know, no matter where you go, you're gonna encounter, you know, the most messed up of people. But at least the KKK isn't, you know, it's not that they're not here, but it's that they don't have that political influence that they once had. And so I just thought this was very interesting to read this article piece from almost 100 years ago, listening to a bunch of Republicans talking about how horrible the KKK is, in turn white supremacy at its core, and how they needed to fight to keep that from infiltrating their party. You know, you look at that, correlate it to today, it's like, wow, how things do change. The party's changed a lot, and with it, their priorities, obviously. Why does my skin look like I have like gold skin? This is very frightening right now. My camera's getting real. What is happening? There we go. All right, problem solved. I'm sorry, that was probably very traumatizing. If it was as traumatizing for you as it was for me to have to witness that, then my humble apologies, blame the camera. You're supposed to be 4K. So anyway, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to tell that story, and just like, woohoo! It's like the priorities went like that, and then the party went like that, so instead of staying further apart from white supremacy, the Republican Party is now just kind of mashed into it. Good Lord. Lord only knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So anyway, thank you so much for joining today. I know this one's a little bit more political than others, and if you don't agree with my politics, I mean, whatever. Generally speaking, if you don't like what I have to say by pointing out, you know, valid points, like the Republican Party doesn't call out white supremacists, you're just wrong. And if you're going to argue with me about elements of white supremacy and racism and so on, like against the side that I'm part of, which is the side that says that stuff is wrong, then you're setting yourself up to get screwed over really bad. Like who in there, right? Oh God, they're coming to get me. I recognize that. Oh God, it's a Republican helicopter. Oh God. Okay, I gotta get out of here. They're coming. They're coming to get me. This guy probably thinks I'm nuts. No, seriously, they're coming to get me. So I better. Oh my God, they're coming to get me. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow and they won't have gotten to me. Surely if I hide out where I live, they won't be able to find me, right? Right. So again, one more time, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit on my Patreon. I'm always posting other stuff there. Links in the description, as well as links to my Instagram, Facebook. Oh God, these kids are gonna come kill me. These poor kids are gonna come and kill me. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Reddit, subreddit. This has been Steve the Amateur Historian. I hope I see you tomorrow.